Welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. Our goal is to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always worth your time.
In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Amanda Werner. Amanda is an experienced nurse with a deep passion for neurocare. She's dedicated to advancing the knowledge and skills of her team, ensuring that patients receive the most cutting-edge treatments available. Her impact spans across multiple hospitals and countless miles, but her mission remains the same: better outcomes for all. Whether you're new to stroke care or a seasoned professional, Amanda's insights and energy are sure to inspire. This episode is called A Surefire Recipe for Stroke Care.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Holly. It's great to be with you today.
Great to have you. In this episode, we welcome Amanda Werner, an experienced nurse and dedicated leader in neuro and stroke care. Amanda works across multiple facilities to help healthcare teams deliver efficient and effective stroke care, regardless of their location and oftentimes their resources. She recently presented on the main stage at BCN's Learn Live Colorado Springs conference and led a 3.5-hour pre-conference session focused on her specialty, stroke. We are grateful for the valuable insights she shared with those attendees and also what she'll be chatting about today. Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to. Amanda Werner is a registered nurse with 15 years of experience and over a decade of which has been dedicated to neuro and stroke care. In 2018, she transitioned into the role of stroke coordinator, and by 2021 became the stroke program manager for the Northern Colorado region. In this role, she supports 4 hospitals, 2 freestanding emergency departments, and collaborates closely with regional EMS agencies, referring facilities, and other stroke programs. Amanda is recognized for developing workflows that adapt to various facility needs, and her focus is on clinical education and sharing strategies that support stroke programs, especially in smaller or resource-limited settings. The regional models and connections she has established have been effective and replicable across different healthcare environments. Amanda, welcome to BCN and Friends podcast. It's great to have you with us.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for such a killer introduction. Makes me feel super welcome.
Well, I mean, you earned it, so you get it. I know you've also spoken on multiple levels and multiple stages on the topic of neuro, but before we dive more deeply into that, can you let us a little bit about why you decided to become a nurse in general, and then maybe from there into why you have such a passion for caring for patients with neurological injuries and different stroke disease processes?
For sure. I actually didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up when I was in high school. My junior year of high school, I took an anatomy and physiology class, and there's this assignment where we got a patient with a set of symptoms, a timeline of exposure, and we basically had to do a full investigation of what disease process the patient was undergoing, what their outcome was going to be, the mortality associated with it. It was like a giant puzzle, and I freaking loved it. It ended up being meningococcal meningitis was the diagnosis that this case had, and I fell in love with digging into the symptoms, digging into the exposure, kind of figuring out why a patient looked the way they did and how we could potentially be a part of fixing that. And then as that class continued, I really fell in love with the way the human body works. It was the first I grew up in a small town. It was the first time I'd been exposed to A&P, and I absolutely adored it. Went to college with a focus of biology, and my oldest sister is actually a nurse. And so she kind of closed that gap, and I enrolled into nursing school, and that need to dig in and sleuth through the unknown kind of stuck with me. I think that's what's at the basis of my love of neuro, because I think the reason so many people don't like neuro is the uncertainty, is the gray, it's the fear of the unknown because they don't follow the rules. And you're walking into a patient care scenario where you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. But I loved being part of making that better. Even if I didn't have the answer right then, I got to be part of making it better, knowing we were going to figure it out. And now that I've been in it, one of our neurologists actually, he described it perfectly. Like neurology and stroke is the specialty where everyone else is running away from the burning building with the blueprints in their hand. And we are walking into the building with no blueprints in our hand to try to figure out what's going on. And that's kind of been at the heart of how I work to try to make it more understandable for everyone.
Well, I wanted to jump back into that really quick. I know Holly has lots of questions for you too, but wanted to jump back into that really quick because sounds to me like your whole healthcare career started from an educator inspiring you to get into the healthcare world. And now you have taken on this role of being an educator to inspire others. And so I know you're in this neuro role, but what do you feel is like the most rewarding part of that job for you? Is it the physical view of the patient changing before your eyes sometimes? Is it the education that you do that inspires others that then take that all over the place? Like what do you find to be really valuable about your current role?
So this might sound terrible. I'm a little bit of a broken nurse some days, I think, because I loved impacting patients, being part of, taking care of them face to face. Is that fantastic? Absolutely. It does not fill my bucket like seeing hundreds of nurses and hundreds of EMTs know what to do to take care of patients. That's where my passion is, especially in this specialty because it's so hard. If I can make it understandable for the masses, my own ability to impact patient care is magnified. And like you can't even quantify that. I I feel fulfilled when I see these nurses, these EMTs saying, "Oh my God, I caught that. Oh my God, I understood that. I got to be part of fixing that, and I know what I'm looking at. I know why or how to do all of these things I'm being told to do." That's at the heart of my education. I hate when people should on people. We're nurses. We get should on all the time. I like making people understand the how do we do this? Why do we do this?
That is an awesome response. I'm so glad Michael dug a little deeper there. I will say that while my heart is for individual impact, I do see that. I love seeing in the care that I give patients like directly impact them, their family. That is fulfilling. I think it's one of the reasons people become nurses and want to stay nurses. I also have fully recognized that a frustration point for me oftentimes is feeling like there's just links in the chain that aren't there. And so even though I could do a really good job, and I will do a really good job, I'm not the only link in the chain of care for this patient. And if the other people in that chain don't have the understanding, don't have the knowledge, don't have the resources, then while I might have done a good job, if the the chain of care is broken down past me or before me, then really like what is the total benefit for that patient? And I think for you being able to deliver kind of that broad view and looking at all the different links in the chain and going, we all should have very strong understanding when it comes to stroke patients. I think I understand completely why that would fill you up and make you super passionate, super excited. Because again, then you're like, look, when we're all operating at the top of our game and we know what we're doing, then patients really do so much better. And I have seen it in stroke programs that I've worked under. These changes that we're making, these things that we're doing, they really do work. And it all has to start from that first call, that first 911 call, patients getting pre-hospital care, getting to the right facility. Like all of that makes such a big difference. And I think that as a bedside nurse for years, It just made me super excited to be part of that and to feel like, okay, I'm part of a team. We're all working for the same thing and we're all trying to make it better for patients. So I really do understand why you're doing that. I'm so glad you are. And I guess this kind of leads me to my next question because given your experience, obviously you've been doing this for a little bit. You've kind of been having that higher level view when it comes to nurses across emergency, critical care, med surge, the stroke patients, neuro patients, they don't just stay in like one particular area of the hospital. They kind of travel around a little bit. So they come underneath a lot of hands that care for them. So when it comes to caring for stroke patients, where do you see excellence? Where are we getting things right? And then where would you say are just some opportunities for improvement, especially when it comes to specifically nursing care?
I think as a whole, all the flavors of nurses, we all want to do the best thing. We are all here to do a good job and positively impact our patients. So I think that passion and that natural tendency and pride we take in doing well is there across the board. I feel like the additional excellence also, I'm starting to see more and more nurses picking up on symptoms and trusting themselves, not talking themselves out of being worried for a patient. I think some of that is training. I think some of that is a shift in culture for some places between nurses and providers and being able to say, hey, doc, I'm worried about this patient and having something be done about it. I think nurses do a great job of picking up on those subtle symptoms because of the amount of time we spend with the patients. We are the eyes on the patients. So being the eyes, picking up on those little intricacies and changes and relaying them to the teams that need to know, I think everyone across the board excels at. I think like you mentioned, Holly, the tendency of a patient to move through multiple departments. It should happen. That's what we want to see. We want to see that progression. I think overall, even with those pain points of transitions of care, nurses do a great job of making sure patients get where they need to be. And that sometimes is half the battle. I think some of the biggest places for opportunities for improvement is again coming back to the how or why of what we're doing. Okay, this patient meets criteria for a stroke alert. I'll call it. I've checked this box. What else can a nurse do to make sure that these patients are moving quickly, not landing in a room, getting straight to CT, changing that gown, getting the patient back to the room? Those are very tasky things, but figuring out how you can actually do that in a better way within your own facility. I think from a very specific point of view, looking for some of those trickier posterior stroke symptoms, we still see a lot of misses with posterior stroke symptoms because they just are difficult to pick up on. Working on those within your department are areas for improvement. And this is almost an impossible ask, but juggling the intensity and the time sensitivity of these patients with an already busy department. I think emergency nurses especially have one of the hardest areas with that because they have to be able to do the 1,262 things we're asking them to do for their stroke patient very, very quickly, and then jump to the rest of the rooms in their zone without losing track of that stroke patient. So really valuing the impact that an emergency nurse has on these patients and learning how to juggle those responsibilities better, which is hard, especially if you don't have the infrastructure and the leadership to do that.
Yeah. I think having leadership support is super critical, especially in the busy ER when you're holding or when you're needing to move people through and having the ability for somebody to recognize this is a very sick patient that's going to be very resource intensive um, and helping to foster that support is really valuable. And as a former ER educator, I've had a lot of pushback against stroke. And I'm going to say a few things to you that you have probably heard multiple times yourself, would be my guess. But just out of curiosity, when we're talking about education and the diagnosis of stroke, there's a lot of people that kind of get weary of it. They get tired of hearing about stroke. They get tired of hearing about the numbers. As a speaker at a conference, you could have 100 people say great things about you and one person say something negative, and that might be the one negative you remember. Similarly, with stroke, you could have some great outcomes, but then somebody's inevitably going to throw back, oh, but what about the one time this patient got TPA and they had this really bad outcome? Or what about the one time XYZ happened? So you have some of that with people constantly like pulling up some of those negative experiences, and then you have other people that feel like a lot of the stroke protocols are just based around what some government agency thinks we need to do in some time frame that they feel like we have to have. So as an educator, when I know you're probably fighting against some of that, and then with the standards that are in place to have continuing education, whether it's every year or every 2 years, how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep clinicians interested in stroke and push past some of those negative ones that consistently want to be negative, regardless of how you try to change the expression of education?
That's a big one. That's a lot of layers there.
Well, we have time. We have time. It's
I
okay.
know. I love it though, because that this is actually like this hits my heart because I do think I specifically have some of the passion and outlook I do because of where I am and who I work with. So our stroke team's culture, our stroke coordinator team culture is very unique. Think about some of your own stroke teams that you've worked with. A lot of stroke coordinators are like the hall monitors. The only time you see them is when they're there to tell you you've done something wrong or you missed this or hey, you need to get your swallow screen in, which is well intended. It comes from a good place of trying to improve practice. But as a super busy emergency nurse, if the only time you see someone is when they're going to tell you you did something wrong, you're not going to care. Those negative situations are going to become your norm. You're going to completely shove away any of the potential for positivity or acquisition of learning because of that outlook. So from my own perspective, but this is also rolled into our team perspective, we are not the stroke coordinators that go down to the ER with every stroke alert saying, did you get to CT or not? We go down to say, hey, we're here. You guys got this. You can do this. You tell us where you want us. We want to empower our staff to do all of this. And part of that is when they bring up those terrible scenarios, hey, this patient died right in front of me, this neurologist ripped my head off. It is key to acknowledge that those have happened and that it does happen and that neurologists are human, patients are human, we're human. Acknowledging the negative tendencies is key. But then you have to figure out, what are we actually going to focus on? What do you need from us? What do you need from your stroke team? What does your department need? And we've kind of incorporated that tendency into our team's outlook. So we'll go around in the ED just to say hi. We don't go down with a purpose, with an intent of saying, hey, you missed this. They probably see us more just saying hi than they do for actual stroke alerts. Because many stroke alerts, we trust, we have laid that foundation of trust that they can do this. They don't need us to do this. So I think the trust is a big part of overcoming some of those negative historical exposures to stroke, but also establishing a camaraderie. We are proud of how our EDs work. We're proud of what our EMS does. And we're going to give you the tools to make sure that you can do this without us. Are we here? Are we in your corner? 100%. But at the end of the day, it is our bedside nurses, it is our charge nurses, it is the people in the department taking care of these patients, not us. So our job, my job, is to make sure that they have what they need to do the right thing, because I want them to be proud, because I already am. So I think that's been at the heart of a lot of our relationship building, overcoming some of the negativity. And I think one of the things that educators in general sometimes do wrong is try to fight all the battles. we're going to fix all the things. And here's all the checklists and all the emails and all of the competencies, and we're going to do it all the time. There's a fine skill to choosing which battles you're going to fight, which ones are important from both a regulatory, an American Heart Association standpoint, but also what's important to the department that you're actually dealing with. Maybe our door to CT times are 12 minutes instead of 10, but the staff are more worried about CT always being held up, not necessarily moving from the ED to CT. So you have to be able to figure out what your audience's needs are and make it applicable to them so that they have the pride to be able to do the things they need to do.
Yeah, I have often encountered this kind of sometimes this us versus them mentality. And I think it can be very difficult because truthfully, we're all on the same team. We're fighting for this patient, and the enemy is this disease or this acute or whatever it is that's trying to like kill them or decline their quality of life. Like that's what we're fighting against. And so I think changing that mentality and changing a culture, view, and environment can be very difficult. But to your point, just establishing trust, you got to start there, right? You got to start there, that mutual respect and that language of like, we are on a team, we believe it. That's how you start to build a great program and a great team. And then also what you were saying about education, I've definitely set in on some education where I was like, this feels like buckshot. Like we are going to learn about everything today. And it's in some ways, maybe you need to have more like that pie plate mentality when you're coming in. It's like, we're going to try to, aim at bring it in a smaller target because it can't, again, with attention spans and also like trying to figure out priorities for different locations and different facilities. I think there's something to be said of like, yeah, the cookie cutter idea of education, yeah, it might check the box, but does it actually make an impact? And then you have to ask yourself, what are we really doing it for? And if it is just to check that box, then okay. But if you're really trying to impact change and bring about things that you want to see in your community and in your facility, then you're probably going to have to tighten up that grouping a little bit and get and figure out where it is that we actually need to focus on. And once we get that right, we can move on to the next thing. Because let me tell you, there will always be a need for education. There
Always.
will always be learning. There will always be things changing. So you're never going to run out of things to educate about. That's just the truth. Even in the specialty of stroke, you're never going to run out. So you're secure. You will always have something to educate on.
I was going to say part of it is also knowing what's important to who you're talking to. Like even at the BCEN conference in my pre-con, I was like, all right, how many of you have centers that do thrombectomy? Because I could talk for 3.5 hours about thrombectomy, but if your facility doesn't offer it, why do you care about the details of it? You're going to care about what you need to do to get the patient there. So part of overcoming that and keeping education interesting and applicable is, what does this matter to you? Why should you care? And how can you be part of making this better? Because you're spot on. We could go for hours about stroke and neuroanatomy and all of those things. But at the end of the day, what do you as an ED nurse need to know to do your job better? What do you as a transport nurse flying these super sick patients between facilities need to know to do your job better? And that varies based on the audience that you are in front of.
Yeah. Such good advice. If you're an educator listening, that's just some pearls of wisdom about how to honestly simplify your objectives a little bit. So kind of building on what you're saying, Michael talked briefly about like your bio and you did about how you got into your career, what you're doing now. You've been building and expanding the stroke program, multiple sites, a huge emphasis on coordination throughout the continuum of care. And we kind of talked about it a little bit. I guess just kind of broadly, like what are some of the key challenges of making that type of an implementation? And then I think you can only go into something like that if you have a goal in mind. And I feel like it always comes back to the patient So how have you seen that impact? What was it you were trying to do, and what are you seeing happen?
So to answer kind of the what do we want to happen and what are we aiming for, our outlook has always been, it is not the frontline staff. It's not their job to know what boxes we're trying to check. It's not their job to know the specifics. That is our job. Our job is to know all of these details, all of the boxes we have to check, all of the rules. And our primary job is to connect the what we need to do with how do we do it. It is the staff's job to know how to do it. So that's what we've always focused on, is how are you going to meet all of these requirements? We don't teach till we're blue in the face about the requirements. We teach about how we're going to meet them. And I will tell you, running a multi-site stroke program is never boring. Because even with having an end goal of, yes, we want to put best practices for stroke in place at all of our sites. How that looks across each site varies immensely, and our resources vary immensely. We're a pretty robust stroke program, but we are a bunch of community hospitals. We are not large academic centers. We just started doing thrombectomy a year and a half ago. Before that, we shipped everyone out. So we had to go about this and maintain it with a very small scope, with a very small amount of resources. And the ultimate goal being, no matter where a patient showed up, whether it was driving themselves in with stroke symptoms, which is its own battle, or calling 911 and being brought in by EMS, if you showed up to one of our facilities, we want to make sure that the staff there know exactly what to do, and you will get treatment. Knowing not everything's going to be perfect, that is fine. And knowing the details of each site. We're very lucky. Again, we have the same ED provider group across all 4 hospitals and freestands. We have the same radiology group and the same neurology group. So doing a lot to make sure that those groups are on the same page is at the foundation of how we do this as well. But paying attention to the unique needs of each of the sites. So our freestands, for example, you look across the nation, and a lot of freestands do nothing with stroke. They call 911 and ship them out. But half of our stroke volumes are triage arrivals. So why would we not make sure that those triage arrivals driving themselves to the nearest ED can be taken care of? So for our freestands, we put in the same practices as the hospitals. We just cater it to the unique needs there. There's a higher priority on transferring post-lytic patients from our freestands because they treat with lytics, because patients will walk in and be eligible for lytics. One of our hospitals has an amazing EMS entrance at the back of the department with a nice quiet hallway that goes straight to CT. So as soon as that EMS crew brings a patient in, they get straight to CT. So their door to CT times are prime, but maybe not so much with their door to needles because they have to trek all the way across the department before they interface with pharmacy. So knowing some of those details of what each site's needs are has really helped make this regional program work. We can speak to each of the sites, we can speak to the larger scale needs, but we're still catering it to each individual site's needs. I think one of the biggest undertakings and also one of the biggest successes of our regional outlook is the education. Because somehow or another, we have to be able to educate. I think we have about 400 ED nurses across all of those sites, about 1,500 EMS folks, plus another 50 to 100 critical care transport and flight crew members. Our team has 5 coordinators. So we have done a lot of work to figure out what is the education, how do we deliver it, especially given the stretches on nursing bandwidth. We rarely make nurses come in person for any of our education. Most of our education is based on a delivery where we take it to the staff. we bring it to the staff in a way that they can understand and access quickly and easily without having to do a bunch of extra work. So we do EMS new hire academies. We teach our own NIH class. It's a lot of the same content I did at the pre-con in the Colorado Springs conference. We teach that in person and online and alternate that monthly. So no matter which nurse it is, they have the option to attend and learn in a way that works for them. Our annual education requirements are all online, but we build it based on what we know our program gaps are. So again, it's not the staff having to figure out, well, what do I do? What do I need to focus on? It's us saying, we know you need to focus on this. We're going to give it to you. I think that is at the heart of how we've managed to have a successful regional program.
Well, thanks for sharing all those tips, Amanda. Thank you. We have a lot of good like systems improvement things. I'm going to throw some rapid fire questions at you. These are totally off the cuff, but I just want to, for the sake, because you did a really good job presenting in Colorado at the conference. So for the sake of those that weren't able to hear, really quick, oldest patient age-wise that you have ever been familiar has received TPA?
103 years old because she collapsed while she was drinking on her porch.
Youngest patient that you have experienced that has received a thrombolytic?
Thrombolytic, I would say 16. Thrombectomy is 10.
Wow. Okay. The last one, the greatest number of weeks gestation of somebody that you've cared for that received neuro?
37 weeks gestation with both lytics and intervention.
Well, that is absolutely crazy as well.
It is crazy.
You shared a little bit, some of the, not those exact stories, but you shared some of those stories, and I think it really brought a lot of eye-opening thought to people at the conference of thinking about stroke outside the usual bubble that we think of it in. And you obviously have a lot more experience than most of us do in that regard, and we appreciate you sharing it with everyone there. And one of the questions that I always enjoy asking, I don't get to ask the rapid fire questions on this podcast. Holly does. So I just thought I'd make up my own. Questions that I always like asking is if there's a person or a moment in your career that really impacted you as an individual, whether it's a patient, whether it's a staff member, a mentor, or a family member, or anybody else that may have really, looking back on your career, you really felt like it has made an impact on you.
So I'm going to throw another oddball out at you because it was actually a negative influence. I'm very much, I may not know what I want to do, but I sure know what I don't want to do. And that person was actually one of my managers earlier in my career. And he brought our unit to shambles. It was the epitome of that poor leader. Like that session at the conference, like spoke to me because I'm like, this is literally what changed my career, was a really poor leader who would sit there and task us away. This is what you guys all need to do. This is what you need to fix, with no guidance, no backup, no recommendations on how we're going to do it. And I was a new grad, actually, and a lot of the staff I was working with on the unit at that time I'd known for years because I worked with them as a CNA and graduated into that unit. And I watched some of the strongest clinicians fall apart because they couldn't do their job. They didn't have the backup. They had no one to turn to because their direct leader, who was supposed to drive everything for them, was a complete mess. And it was actually then, because I was a new grad, I was on nights. I was, of course, charged within 3 months of graduating. Like, are you sure this is the best idea here? I realized how important it was to be the resource for the staff, have the answer for the staff, be that person they can lean on in order to impact patient care even more than I could myself. Did I love taking care of patients? For sure. But when I could see my colleagues brighten back up because, oh my God, we solved this together and we got through this crap storm of a shift, that stuck with me. And seeing the impact of a negative leader made me want to be a better leader, to be part of the reason that the hundreds of nurses in our hospitals can do what they need to do in a way that works. So probably one of the most impactful people of my career was a negative impact, because I never wanted to see that again. I still struggle with that when I see, poor leadership. I'm like, how can you expect people to do the things they need to do with no resources or no awareness of how to do that? So that is a major driver for me, current state, and still a huge passion of mine to try to show others that you can be a leader whether you're in a formal role or not.
That's powerful. I know you referenced another session at Colorado Springs, and I will say that hearing the impact that a bad leader can have, and then also knowing that I've seen really great leadership and seeing how that can also move things forward. It's just such a contrast. And then to your very good point, it kind of instills something in you and you say like, well, whatever I do, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the leader in someone else's story that held them back or even maybe pushed them away. And I think that that's where you can take a really tough experience and use it to be better, to develop yourself, to work on the areas where we all have strengths that we need to lean into. We all have areas we can improve, but I do think that there's just like that awareness, and we could dive into that. Man, we could be on that topic forever, but I appreciate you sharing that. I have no doubt that there will be people who will listen to this podcast episode and maybe they're sitting underneath really tough leadership and going like, why? Why is this a part of my story? And to hear someone like you who's now just opening doors and leading people in a positive way that gets them excited about the work that they do and gives them the resources that maybe they can see themselves in the future and see like, hey, there is stuff to take from here. Maybe a lot of it is what I will not do. So, still lessons to be learned. So thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. I will say that I do get to ask those rapid fire questions, even though Michael kind of did his version earlier, which I'll be honest, I did get to hear your session, obviously at Colorado Springs. And yeah, there were some of those case studies that you did. And I was like, what? So yeah, I would highly recommend checking those out. Here are a few rapid fire questions for you. Okay. What would you be doing if you were not in your current role?
Probably be a chef. I love cooking, love food. It's my love language. 100%.
Okay. What is your specialty dish?
I make a mean sous vide steak, and homemade pasta sauces are my jam. I can do some mean Southern food too. Shocker.
I am excited. I would like to reserve a table at your restaurant. Hypothetically, theoretically, maybe even in the future, I would like to already put in my reservation because that sounds delightful. Yum. All right. We have a few favorite categories. Here we go. What's your favorite book or quote that like really inspires you?
Favorite book is Gone with the Wind, hands down.
That is a good book. Man,
It is a good one.
Such a good book. So well written. And I will also say that there are sometimes when I read period books and I struggle to like put the pictures, bring it all together. But then there are some books when I'm like, it is happening in my mind. I can see it. So yeah, great recommendation. All right. For those who are not book lovers, but maybe they like a movie, a TV show, or a binge-worthy series, you got a recommendation for us?
I am a sucker for Hell's Kitchen. I love cooking anything shows. And kind of dark, but the series You is one of my favorites right now.
Isn't that the one about like they stalk people or something? Is that okay?
Serial killer. Yep. That'd be the one. Indeed.
You're speaking to probably a pretty broad audience that might or might not be attracted to a little bit of the dark humor and or dark subject matter. So very good recommendations, I will say. And I love a good cooking show. I used to watch Chopped all the time, but then I quickly realized, like, when am I going to have some of these random food objects ever in my kitchen? And I would just be like, of course I know what to do with that because you'll never have that in your kitchen ever. But it's good that you know that you can mix it with peanut butter and it really takes on a different flavor, right? But I do love a good cooking show, so great recommendations. All right, favorite song or musical artist that can just instantly move you?
Oh, that's a tough one. Favorite song is probably Hurricane by Luke Combs. I love me some country. And Perfect by Ed Sheeran. That was the song Corey and I danced to at our wedding.
Oh, such a good
So
song.
that one will get me every time.
Man, that Ed Sheeran, he can do it all. He can make you like cry and get all moody, and then he can also write like a pop hit, and you're like, boom, 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 boom. So, yeah, that's a good one. All right, we could stay there, but I am super interested in this. So, do you have like a self-care go-to or a way that helps you reset?
Cooking is one of my favorite escapes. Making dinner is not a chore to me. It's like my zone in, and I do my own thing. I like to go to the beach. We take an annual beach trip to get away. Because my husband is a nurse, we take care of everyone all the time. So once a year, we run away, go to an all inclusive resort, and get taken care of ourselves. And if neither of those are an option, I lay on the floor and stare at a moving ceiling fan as my way to like refocus and turn my brain off.
Like a mindful practice. When people talk about meditating or kind of sitting in the moment and that kind of stuff, I'm like, sometimes you have to trick yourself by doing something very mindless or meaningful. That's a lot of times why I tend to go for walks down our block. And obviously, I've been down my street multiple times. So there's usually not a lot of surprises happening. Although I often feel like I'm like, am I that person who's like, oh, they got that new plant at their house? Like sometimes I'm like, am I turning into the lady like looking through the blinds, like, oh, when I go on my walk? But there's
There's nothing
something.
wrong with that.
It's true. I mean, we're always assessing, right? So that's what I tell myself. But there's something about putting your body in a pattern of just walking and moving where it's not, you don't have to think about it. Your body kind of just naturally wants to do it. There's not a lot of exciting changes to see, but I do find that it helps me to process through. Maybe I've put something aside because I'm like, I just can't spend any more brain power about it or situation or something that I'm maybe wrestling with. And I feel like when I go on my walks, I may not have solved it. I may not, it may not be fixed. It may be no different than when I first encountered it, but there is something to like having a little bit more mental clarity, a little space. So yeah, whatever that might be, whether it be staring at a ceiling fan, going for a walk, sitting and finding inner peace or whatever it is that you do. I think just giving time for your brain to kind of unwind itself a little bit is important. And so that really kind of goes back to the heart of self-care. You've got to take care of yourself. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Wants to follow you online, which I would highly suggest they do. Where, on what social media platforms or where can they reach out to you?
I would say LinkedIn is a great option, as is my email. I live in my email. I think that's one of the primary ways I communicate, being part of a regional group and talking across the country. So either option would be great.
Awesome. Well, I will link those in the blog post for this episode. So thanks for sharing them.
Well, Amanda, thank you for being on here with us today. It's great to chat with you again and talk about stroke and about systems and how to improve them. And just wanted to again reiterate how much of an excellent job you did at the conference. And it's clear that you have a passion for education and for impacting the world of stroke in a great way. And so, really great to hear your session, but also just great chatting with you, learning more about your passion for stroke care and a little bit more about you. And anytime you want to show up and cook for us, you're certainly welcome to do that too.
We'll have dinner, nerd out, and stare at ceiling fans. It'll be a winning evening.
That sounds like it. Sounds like it.
Sounds like it's going to check so many boxes, so many boxes. Well, Amanda, I want to take this time to thank you for joining us for this episode of BCN and Friends. Amanda, it is always a joy to spend a little bit of time with you again and to have a conversation that I feel like can truly propel healthcare improvement and move us forward. It's also just something wonderful to see the positive impact you're making for patients and families impacted by neurological diseases and trauma. These patients and their families, they need us. And so the fact that you're helping to equip people to do that better, ah, chef's kiss, truly. So we appreciate you and all that you are doing. And to our listeners, stay tuned as we bring new, insightful episodes of BCN and Friends. If you have an episode suggestion, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us a message to bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs, here with Michael Dexter, and on behalf of the entire BCN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.